Sleep ship archive. Transmission initiated. Vessel status stable. All primary systems nominal. Cryosleep monitoring nominal. Archive integrity confirmed. Voyage year 214. Tonight's record comes from the cold survey files of old Earth. The subject, the Arctic, the northernmost region of the planet, a place of ice and open sky, of silence that is not empty, and of cold that does not merely lower temperature but simplifies, that removes what is not necessary. That holds what remains unchanged, at depth, for as long as the cold holds. This record is preserved for the colonists aboard this vessel, for those who will one day stand at the edge of what a world permits, and need to know what cold reveals, what becomes visible when everything excess has been stripped away. You may rest now. The archive will do the work of the night. You know what cold is before the word for it, not as information, not as temperature read from a surface. Cold is something the body carries as knowledge, the withdrawal of warmth, the tightening inward, the sharpening of the line between skin and the air that is asking for what the skin carries. The Arctic of old Earth was cold in a way that made all other cold seem temporary, not brutally, not as a punishing force that arrives and passes, as condition. The kind of cold that does not come and go with the wind or the shade, but settles into everything evenly, continuously, without relent. The kind of cold that is not weather. It is what the place is made of. Step into it, or imagine stepping into it, which in this context is the same thing. And the first thing that happens is the breath. Cold air entering the lungs is denser than warm air, more present. It announces itself in the chest with a kind of precision, a crispness that the body recognizes as, this place is real, and I am inside it. The breath in the Arctic does not merely oxygenate, it orients. The lungs feel the weight of the air in a way warm air never allows, a pressure, not unpleasant, an insistence on being noticed. The second thing is the face. The parts of skin left exposed, the forehead, the cheeks, the tip of the nose, register the cold as definition. The boundary of the body becomes precise. The outside and the inside are no longer vague neighbors but clearly separated by the thin line of skin, suddenly conscious of its own function. The body's edge sharpens. What is inside is more clearly inside. The Arctic does this continuously to everything. In warmer places, boundaries blur. Humidity moves between bodies and atmosphere. Heat radiates outward, softening the distinction between warm thing and warm air. Things merge a little at their edges. In the cold, the edges clarify. What is warm is specifically urgently warm. What is cold is exactly, structurally cold. The boundary between them is where the skin is. This is not discomfort at the level the body is built to tolerate. It's a kind of clarity. The cold does not add anything. It removes. It provides conditions in which what is already present becomes more legible. The body in the cold is more precisely itself. Its warmth a more deliberate achievement. Its boundary a more conscious fact. The air is dry and clear. The horizon is visible. Sound arrives without the diffusion that humidity introduces. Light does not scatter through atmospheric moisture, but travels at low angles through clear cold air and casts shadows that reveal texture in everything they touch. This is what the cold does, not diminishment, simplification. What the cold removes, you do not miss until you return to where it was. In warmer environments, the world is in continuous motion. The chemistry of decomposition proceeds without pause. Organic material is broken down and reassembled into other forms. The air carries particles in every direction. The ambient processes of thousands of living things. Decomposers, processors, the cycling of nutrient through soil and root and leaf. All of it continuous. All of it contributing to a richness that is also, in another sense, a kind of noise. The the cold silences this. Below a certain temperature, the chemistry of return cannot proceed. What is formed stays formed. What is ended stays ended, in the shape of its ending, held in the cold without transformation. There is no excess here. What remains in the Arctic is what could not be removed, which is to say, what had been refined by conditions into the form that the conditions required. The organisms that survive do so not by fighting the simplification, but by having become, over generations, forms that the cold cannot improve on. Nothing decorative, nothing provisional, only what was required by the place, in the exact form the place asked for. You recognize this principle, not from the Arctic perhaps, but from any moment when difficulty stripped away what was incidental and what remained was the core. The thing that had always been there, that did not require warmth or ease or the accumulation of excess to be exactly what it was. Cold simplifies. What the cold of the Arctic leaves is not a diminished version of what was there before. It is a clarified version. The same living world, with everything that was contingent and temporary and incidental removed from it. The summer visitors gone, the warmth-dependent processes gone, the noise of abundance gone, until what remains is the core, the structure beneath, the thing that was always there, visible now only because everything else that obscured it has been removed. The cold of this vessel is doing something similar, not stripping, not reducing, but holding at a temperature below the threshold of unnecessary change, maintaining the form, preserving what was present at departure, while time accumulates outside the shell of the cold, and the voyage continues, and the distance grows. What was sealed at the moment of leaving remains sealed. The deep ocean trench had no horizon. In every direction at the trench floor, the same medium extended. Water, pressure, permanent dark, without visible edge. Orientation was internal. The only reference was gradient, more or less of a condition in one direction or another. No surface to face, no line to aim for. The Arctic is the opposite. The surface of the ice extends flat in every direction, and the horizon sits at the edge of visibility, clear and sharp and evenly placed. A line between the white of the ground and the color of the sky above it, running all the way around, at equal distance from wherever you stand. You are at the center of a circle. The edge is the same in every direction. The horizon in the Arctic is not mountains at a distance or trees at the edge of a clearing. It is the actual limit of vision, the precise place where the curvature of the planet places the boundary between what can be seen and what is over the edge. And because the Arctic is flat, because there is nothing between you and the horizon, you see the horizon itself, the real thing, not something placed in front of it. The human body evolved with horizons. The eye is shaped for them. The long lateral field of vision, the specific way the brain processes the distance to a flat horizon as an absolute coordinate. The horizon tells the body, you are here, the edge of the visible world is there. And the distance between them is known. You are located. You are oriented. The world is organized around you at a scale you can perceive. In the Arctic, this works with unusual precision, and yet the Arctic horizon has its own strangeness, because what you are looking at is not land, it is ice meeting sky, and the colors can match. A gray sky above gray ice, a white sky above white ice, a surface that reflects what is above it, an atmosphere that takes the color of what is below. When this happens, the line that was the absolute coordinate is still exactly where it was, but the eye cannot find it. White extends in every direction without interruption. Above and below are the same color, the same apparent distance, the same surface. The world has not changed. The horizon is still there, in the exact place it was, but for that moment, it is invisible, present and and imperceptible simultaneously, which is a different kind of disorientation than the trench's total absence. The reference is there, you simply cannot see it. And then the sky shifts, or the light changes, or a shadow falls across the ice, and the line reappears, sharp and equal, exactly where it should be. It was always there. The light of the Arctic comes from the wrong angle. Even in summer, even at noon, the sun never rises high. It moves along the horizon rather than above it. Its arc through the sky is shallow and lateral, more a circle near the horizon than a climb toward overhead. The light at noon in the Arctic arrives from the same angle as the light at dawn or dusk in temperate places, low, raking, deeply horizontal. Overhead light flattens. It eliminates shadow from most surfaces, reducing the three-dimensional world to a bright, even plane. Overhead light is efficient for seeing what is present, but poor for seeing what things are made of. What texture and structure exist in the surface beneath your feet. Low-angle light does the opposite. Every variation in the surface casts a shadow. Every slight ridge in the ice, every crystal irregularity, every place where wind has sculpted the snow into a form. All of it lit from the side, all of it casting its shadow across what surrounds it. A pebble on the ice at noon casts a shadow longer than a person standing in afternoon sun at the equator. The same surface that would look flat in overhead light reveals, in lateral light, its entire topography. The Arctic makes visible what other light conditions hide. There is a specific blue in old compressed ice, not the blue of sky or ocean. An internal blue, deep and structural, that comes from years of compression working the air pockets out of the crystal lattice, densifying the ice until light traveling through it encounters less air and more pure ice and scatters differently, and emerges as that color. It cannot be seen in overhead light. It requires the low-angle illumination of polar sun, entering the ice from the side to travel the depth needed to produce the color. That color exists only there, not as decoration, as a record of how long the ice has been there and how much has accumulated above it and what the weight of years does to the material that holds them. You carry something equivalent, not visual, but the same principle. In conditions that flatten detail, in comfortable, even undifferentiated warmth, the surface of things can be read as uniform. When conditions are harder, the surface reveals itself. What is underneath becomes visible in a way it was not before. The texture of what a thing is made of becomes the subject. The low light shows what the thing actually is. In Arctic summer, the sun does not set, not it sets very late, not the sky stays light for a long time after sunset. The sun travels its arc and reaches the place where it should drop below the horizon, and it does not drop. It continues, low and circular, moving along the horizon without descending, returning at midnight to where it was at noon, and continuing without pause. This is one of the genuinely uncanny qualities of the Arctic. Not frightening, but wrong in a particular quiet way. The wrongness of a reliable signal absent from where it always was. The body has a relationship with the setting sun that predates awareness. The withdrawal of light is a signal that lives in the cellular chemistry, in the circadian machinery older than consciousness by a very long time. When the sun goes down, something initiates, a chemical cascade that leads toward rest, toward the lowered metabolism and the deep work of sleep. This is not chosen, it is ancient. In Arctic summer, the signal does not come, not loudly, not in a way the conscious mind would register. But somewhere in the body, below awareness, a system designed to respond to a specific cue waits. The cue does not come. The sun circles the sky at midnight and at 2 in the morning and at noon, still circling, still present, still not setting. The animals calibrate differently, not to daily light but to the seasonal arc, the temperature, the availability of food, the angle of the sun rather than its presence. They use other clocks, an older kind of orientation. In the long Arctic summer, time is organized differently, not by the daily rhythm but by what lies on either side of the year's long center. The long inhalation of light, the long exhalation of dark, the self-oriented within the larger cycle, the body finding its pace inside a rhythm that does not repeat every 24 hours but every 12 months. Rest in this image, the sun that moves along the horizon without dropping, neither committed to day nor committed to night, held at an intermediate position that does not resolve into either extreme, not confused, simply in a different relationship to the rotation of the planet. In Arctic winter, the sun does not rise. At the furthest latitudes, the sun moves below the horizon at the autumn equinox and does not return until spring. The noon sky is the color of 2 in the morning. The stars are present at midday. The world is dark without interruption, not night as an interval between days, but darkness as condition, as what the season is. The migrations leave before this arrives, the birds that fill the Arctic in summer. Species that have traveled from the other end of the planet, crossing the equator twice each year, arriving in Arctic summer to breed in the long light, are gone before the dark settles. What remains is smaller, more compressed. The species that can exist through the polar night, the ones that found a way. In the clear dark nights, the aurora appears, not predictably, not on a schedule, but in the long winter darkness, when charged particles from the sun move along the planet's magnetic field lines and collide with the upper atmosphere, light is released. Greens, and sometimes reds or blues, moving in curtains and ribbons across the sky from horizon to horizon, completely silent, light in the sky that makes no sound. The silence of the aurora is part of what unsettles, not frightens, but notices. Something that size, that brightness, moving across the entire dome of the sky, should register in the air. It does not. It moves the way a reflection moves, the way light moves on water, like something seen in a medium that does not transmit sound, like the visible expression of a force that has no voice. It is a reminder that what shapes the world is not always loud or visible at all. The magnetic field that holds the aurora is always there. The charged particles are always arriving. The light is the moment when the invisible becomes briefly, brilliantly perceptible, not because the field changed, but because the conditions aligned to make it readable. You are moving through your own polar night. The absence of ordinary light is not the absence of all light. Something continues to move in the dark of the voyage, not visible, but present in the way the magnetic fields are present, shaping what passes through them, orienting what can be oriented, ready to become visible when the conditions that require it arrive. The Arctic is not quiet, but what sounds it contains are clear and widely spaced, and the space between them is large enough that each arrives as an event rather than as part of a background. In warmer, more populated places, the sound environment is layered, different frequencies from different sources at different distances, the continuous ambient noise of life in large numbers. The brain filters this into background before it is consciously heard. You notice silence only when this layer is removed. In the Arctic, it is removed. What remains is very few sounds, and very clear. Wind, when it blows. An Arctic wind is specific, directional, with a character that distinguishes it from the ambient agitation of warmer air. The creak and pop of ice adjusting to temperature change. A sound that comes from no visible source, arrives from everywhere at once, and resolves without trace. The exhalation of an animal at close range, The specific sound of a boot on dry snow, a compression, a squeak, which is different from wet snow and announces a temperature below a certain threshold. These sounds do not blend into background. They arrive into silence as events. Nothing moves, and then something does, and you know exactly where it is, because there is nothing else to be. Sometimes it is wind, arriving without warning, moving across the flat surface in a direction without deviation, sweeping a low sheet of surface snow before it. Gone in seconds. The silence returns, and the surface is slightly different from what it was, and you know it passed through it only by the trace left in the snow. Snow absorbs sound. The flat ice reflects it or carries it across great distances, but attenuated. Sounds that should be loud for their source arrive softer than expected, quieter than their distance warrants, as if the cold made them careful. A sound made a kilometer away across open ice arrives like a whisper. The Arctic silence is not the silence of absence. It is the presence of a vast space with very little in it, and the full, undistracted awareness of what that space contains. You know this quality of attention. The attention that is possible only when the background has been removed, when what arrives alone, into a space large enough to hold it without competition, when there is enough silence around each event that it can be heard exactly as it is, its distance, its direction, its character, without anything else pressing into the same moment. The Arctic teaches this without intending to. What lives in the Arctic has been made exact by cold, not abundant, exact. The Arctic fox in winter is white and compact, and still its geometry an expression of the thermal logic that shaped it across generations. Short ears, short limbs, dense layered fur, a body that produces more heat per unit of surface area than a larger, looser form could sustain. It moves carefully, every motion considered against the cost of making it. It navigates the snow not despite the cold, but within it, exactly as it was made to. In winter, the pregnant polar bear enters a snowdrift and disappears. She excavates a cavity, and her body heat slowly enlarges the space. She remains inside for months. Her heart rate drops, her metabolism slows. She does not eat, she does not emerge. Inside the den, in the cold and the dark and the quiet, she gives birth. The cubs are born small and alive in the insulated space she has made of herself, and she nurses them through the winter months, converting what she stored before the snow came into the heat and milk that maintains them both. She is in there now, in the drift, in the dark, doing something that looks from outside like stillness, but is the most active work she will do all year. When she emerges in spring, she will be lighter, the cubs will be larger, the snow will be melting. Nothing will have been lost in the months of interior work. Below the sea ice, the water is near freezing, 28 degrees, held liquid by the salt, just below the temperature at which fresh water would become ice. And in that water, the seals, warm-blooded, 37 degrees inside, moving through near-freezing water as if it were not a continuous drain on what they carry, maintaining the temperature of a warm summer afternoon inside themselves, in the deepest cold the ocean at that latitude produces. The cold is everywhere around them. It does not reach them. They carry summer with them, not borrowed from a warmer place, not protected against the cold by avoiding it, made continuously from the inside, from the fat stored and the breath taken, and the metabolism of a body that produces more warmth than the cold can take. The warmth is not preserved, it is generated continuously, without pause, through the months of dark. There is no urgency in how they move. The cold is their medium, not their difficulty. They exist inside it as the pressure was the medium of the deep ocean fish, not in spite of the condition, but in the form the condition required. You have seen water freeze, or you know the shape of watching it. The surface stills. The small motions slow at the boundary where the air is coldest. The first crystals form there, flat, hexagonal, extending outward from their first point, connecting to adjacent crystals, to the next crystals forming beside them. A lattice grows across the surface. A skin appears on the water. The crystal is not decided. It was always going to be this way. There is only one form available when the motion leaves, the same form at every scale, in every location, every time the threshold is crossed. Every piece of sea ice, every glacier, every snowflake, the substance does not have another answer. The first ice is transparent. Through it, the dark water below is visible. You can see through one state into the other, through the solid into the liquid, through the formed into the still forming. The boundary is there, impermeable at the same time, not yet a wall. As it thickens, it carries whatever the water held at the moment of freezing. Particles of salt, bubbles of air, the chemical signature of the water it was made from. These are sealed at the moment of solidification and held as long as the ice holds. The ice is not just frozen water. It is frozen water at a particular moment, in a particular place, containing a record of what the world was like when it formed. In the Arctic, ice accumulates, year over year, layer over layer. New ice on old ice. Each year's snowfall pressing the year beneath it a little deeper, compressing it, reducing its air content, changing its optical properties. And at the bottom of an ice sheet, the ice is hundreds of thousands of years old, a different material than the ice at the surface, denser, bluer, holding what was sealed in it when the world above was a different world. In the ice, time is visible, not as metaphor, not as interpretation, as physical fact, layered and readable. Each year of snowfall leaves a layer. The winter snow differs from the summer snowmelt in density and texture and the particles it carried down from the atmosphere. Volcanic eruptions leave a chemical signature in the layer of the year they occurred. The atmospheric chemistry of each century is recorded in what the ice sealed from the air at that time. Scientists learn to read these layers the way pages are read, not for what someone chose to write, but for what the conditions of the year required to be present. The atmosphere of the past is in there. When ice forms and traps air bubbles, it seals the air that was present at the moment of freezing. The bubbles are compressed as the ice deepens, pressed smaller by the weight of years accumulating above them, but they remain, small pockets of what the air was. The chemistry of the atmosphere at that exact moment, the concentration of gases, the particles, the signatures of what was burning and what was blooming in the world at the surface. Release the bubble, and the air that was sealed 800,000 years ago has never been outside. It has been in there, held at temperature, at depth, in the dark, since before any ancestor you could name was alive, since before the first city was built, the first language written, the first ship made. It has been in the ice while everything that constitutes human history proceeded above it. It did not know it was being held. It did not experience the time that passed. It is identical to what it was. This is the moment worth sitting with, not frightening, but strange in the way that the mind circles back to something that does not quite resolve. A thing sealed and held, unchanged, through a span of time that contains everything you can name, and still exactly what it was when it went in. The ice does what the archive does, not by choosing what to preserve, but by providing conditions that prevent loss. It holds everything indiscriminately, the eruption and the calm year, the cold century and the warm one, the year the bloom was abundant and the year it failed. All of it, layer on layer, held because the cold prevented the chemistry of change from proceeding. What you carry is more like ice than archive. It holds what it holds not because a decision was made to preserve it, but because the conditions that would change it have been suspended, not by deliberate choice, by cold, by the withdrawal of the warmth that would have moved through you and altered you into something other than what you were at departure. Open you, eventually, and the air inside will be what it was. But ice is not passive. The cold that holds also stresses. As temperature drops, ice contracts, not by much, but enough. The sheet pulls against itself, and when the tension exceeds what the lattice can hold, it releases. Without warning, a crack propagates across the surface at speed, less a sound than a declaration, a sharp report that travels from one edge toward the horizon and is gone before the body can locate its source. Loud, decisive, absorbed back into silence before the mind has finished registering it. The ice settles into its new configuration. The crack is not failure, it is answer. The surface solving for the new geometry the cold has required. A moment later, the silence is as complete as it was before. Nothing in the texture of the stillness suggests anything happened. But the sheet is different now, and what it holds in a new arrangement, still holding. The permafrost holds things that warmer ground cannot. The permanently frozen layer below the Arctic surface, in some places hundreds of meters deep, in some places undisturbed for hundreds of thousands of years, has preserved what would otherwise have been returned to the cycle of decomposition. The remains of organisms that lived in climates that no longer exist at those latitudes, seeds, pollen, spores, the intact stomach contents of animals whose last meal is still recognizable. A mammoth pulled from the permafrost is not a fossil. A fossil has been replaced. The original material exchanged over time for mineral deposits that hold the shape while losing the substance. The permafrost mammoth retains its original material, the tissue, the hair, the grass it last ate pressed into the preserved stomach. Not replaced, held. The difference matters. A fossil tells you the shape of what was. The permafrost material tells you the thing itself. One is a record made after the fact. The other is the fact intact. Cold does not transform what it contains. It maintains it in its current form. Time accumulates outside. The seasons pass. The climate shifts over thousands of years. The ice retreats and advances. And inside the frozen layer, what was sealed at freezing remains exactly what it was. This is what cold does to time. In warmth, time moves through things and changes them. They decay, are broken down, are reassembled into other forms. The information held in the original form is lost in the reassembly, not destroyed, but distributed, scattered, transformed into something that no longer holds the original record. Warm ground remembers nothing. It transforms everything. Cold ground holds the record. The permafrost is a library without pages. The information stored in the original material itself, not in any representation of it, not described, preserved. The vessel you rest in is a different kind of cold ground. Not the same cold, not the same preservation, but the same logic, the withdrawal of the conditions that would transform, the maintenance of what was sealed at the moment the temperature dropped. When the permafrost thaws, what was held is released, intact, into the conditions that allow it to become again, to grow, to be consumed, to return to the cycles it had been removed from. The season that follows the long preservation is not diminished by what came before it. It begins from the full condition of what was preserved. There is a temperature at which water hesitates, not frozen, not moving. The molecular motion has slowed past the point where fluidity is easy, but has not yet committed to the lattice. A disturbance will send it one direction. Stillness will hold it at the threshold. At this temperature, time seems to slow with the molecules. The chemistry of living things follows the same principle, the metabolic rate. The rate at which cells produce and consume and maintain themselves, the rate at which the body processes and repairs, is chemical, and chemical reactions slow with cold. Not just the chemistry of decay, all of it. The body at cold temperature is not absent. It is proceeding at the pace the cold allows. The same processes across more time. The Arctic hare in deepest winter is not waiting for spring. It is living at the pace of winter, breathing at the pace of winter, moving at the pace of winter, exactly where it needs to be. When spring arrives and the pace changes, nothing will have been lost in the slower months. The hare will shift into the pace of spring from the full condition of having been winter. The body adapts to the pace that the cold allows. You are in this, not at zero, not stopped, at the pace of this depth and this cold. The biological processes that constitute you are proceeding at the rate the chamber permits, not deficient, not absent, but different, slower. The same work across more time. The hare in the snow does not know it is waiting. It is simply there in the cold at the pace of winter, exactly as it needs to be. Something is accumulating in the cold that cannot accumulate at the surface pace. The consolidation that requires stillness. The compression of what was given into the form that will be available when the pace changes. Not all work announces itself. The ice building one layer at a time does not announce its accumulation. The bear in the snow does not announce the work being done in the dark. What is slow enough to seem like stillness is often the deepest kind of work. The kind that only becomes readable later, when conditions change and what was accumulating is finally visible in what it left behind. Return now to the feeling of cold air entering the lungs, the density of it, the way it announces itself, not as discomfort but as precision. The body made aware of its own boundary, the warmth held inside, the cold outside, the line between them clear and continuously maintained. The Arctic is the landscape of clarity, not because it is beautiful, though it often is, not because it is peaceful, though it often is, because the cold removes what is not necessary, and what remains after that removal is legible. The horizon visible in every direction, sharp and equal. The light low enough to reveal texture in everything it touches. The silence spacious enough to hold each sound as a distinct event without competition. The cold honest about itself, continuous, structural, not varying to deceive or to comfort. What is there is what remains after the cold has finished. What is not there has been removed by conditions that do not make exceptions. The form of every organism that lives there is the exact form the cold required. The form of every ice crystal is the only form available. The surface of everything is the surface that the conditions have made visible. Earlier in this voyage, the archive sent a record of the ocean trenches of old Earth, the place where life exists under conditions that would destroy it anywhere else. The place where the pressure that would kill most things is what holds certain things together, where the darkness has never been interrupted, and life has built itself around that dark and become indistinguishable from it. The Arctic is a different edge, not the edge of depth, but the edge of temperature, not the edge of darkness, but, in winter, the edge of light, not the edge of pressure, but the edge of what cold will hold. And life at this edge is not shaped by pressure or dark, but by cold and simplification, by having been reduced, through generation and generation, to exactly what the place required, no less than what the place required. The polar bear in the snow is not diminished by winter. She is doing the most essential work of her life inside it. The seal is not surviving the cold. It is carrying warmth through the cold, generating it continuously from the inside, maintaining summer inside itself through the deepest winter the ocean at that latitude can produce. What the edge asks for is not less, it is exact. You are in your own kind of simplification. The voyage has not diminished what you carry. It has held it at the temperature below the threshold of unnecessary change. What was real at departure is real now. The cold has not improved on it, has not reduced it, has not transformed it into something else. It has held it in its form. The ice core pulls intact from the sheet. The air inside is what it was, not diminished by the time that passed, not different for having been held, carrying the full record of the moment it was sealed. What was preserved was not chosen. It was simply held in cold at depth while everything else continued. This is what you are, not waiting in the sense of incomplete, sealed, preserved, carrying what you carry at the full fidelity of the moment of departure. The horizon is there. It was always there, whether or not the colors matched and the eye could find it. The flat horizon, equal in every direction, the external coordinate that the body evolved to read. When the conditions change, the line will reappear, sharp and clear exactly where it should be. The light, when it comes, will be low and lateral, revealing texture, illuminating the surface of things in a way that overhead light does not, making visible what other light conditions hide. Cold reveals what is essential. What the cold has held is what will be needed. What was sealed remains, not as memory, as you. The archive record for Arctic systems is now complete for this transmission. What the Arctic held was not absence. It held simplification, the removal of everything not necessary until what remained was the thing itself in exact conditions. Ice that preserved the air of 800,000 years, animals carrying warmth through cold that would otherwise reach them, silence spacious enough to contain each event distinctly, a horizon visible in every direction as a fixed coordinate for a body that knows how to use one. The cold is not the opposite of life. It is the condition that shows what life is made of, that removes the incidental and holds the essential, that keeps the record intact, layer on layer, until the conditions that allow reading it arrive. Rest in it. Rest now. Sleep Ship Archive. Transmission complete. Vessel status stable. Cryosleep monitoring nominal. All systems nominal. Archive records sealed and filed. Voyage continues. Please continue restorative sleep.